I think is here also. I'm looking for her on Zoom. I don't see it quite yet. But if you can go ahead and, Charlie, again, if you can spotlight Kimonti and also Gilda. Yay, there's Kimonti. So I don't see Gilda yet. And I don't know whether she's going by a different name. So let's see here. Kimonti, can you say hello so I can see if we can hear you here in the Clubhouse?
Oh, man. Hello, Clubhouse.
Okay, so I don't hear you. Oh, I heard you for a second, so we're still figuring it out. Hello, yay, we have you. Okay. So give me 1 second because I'm going to tell our folks at the Clubhouse. So folks here at the Clubhouse, if you can go ahead and put your attention back up here, we do have Kimonti Carter who has joined us and is shown on the screen. Dick and others at the Clubhouse, if you can turn your attention up here, we do have Kimonti Carter here. Thank you so much. We're still looking to see, I don't know whether Director Gilder Sheppard is yet on the Zoom call, but we're just going to go ahead and start with Kimonti. Alex, if you can turn the light up, that way it might be able to help people. So, Kimonti, I just am, again, so grateful. My name is Ann Miller. For those folks who are on Zoom and who don't know me, my name is Ann Miller. I work with the Mount Baker Community Club and the Mount Baker Meaningful Movies Group, as well as South Seattle Climate Action Network, which actually helps to run our Mount Baker Meaningful Movies program. So I am so grateful to you, Kimonti, for being here tonight. I just want to say from the bottom of my heart just how thankful I am. You can hear people on the Clubhouse, they're clapping. So just again.
Hello?
Sure, let's see. I'm going to get Alex to help me out here at the Clubhouse to make sure that people can hear me too. So let's see if we get this. Okay. Okay, and I'm going to try and speak slowly. I've got some people who are asking me to slow down and speak up. So again, I don't see whether we have Director Gilder Sheppard here yet, but when she comes on, we'll have Charlie, our tech person who's online, will be spotlighting her as well. So we do have Kimonti. Kimonti, thank you for being here. Kimonti, if you are okay with it, I don't know if you can give me the thumbs up if you're ready for me to get started here. It looks like he's on the phone, so I want to give him a minute. But again, I just want to thank all of the Zoom folks for being here and also anybody who's here at the Clubhouse in person. Thank you so much. So while Kimonti is finishing up, I'm going to just read a little bit about him. Of course, you guys know most of this already, but as you learned in the film, Kimonti Carter is the founder of Teach, a prisoner-led higher education program now at multiple Washington prisons and also a leader in the Black Prisoners Caucus. He is an educator, activist, and community organizer who was finally released from prison this past summer. So we are thrilled about that, as I know Kimonti probably is as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and Kimonti, I've got a bunch of questions here, and I want you to speak about what you wish. So if there's something that I don't ask about, feel free to just pipe up with whatever you want to speak about. But your life has changed rapidly.
Sorry about that. This is Gilda trying to get in. Hello?
Oh, okay. So for folks in the Clubhouse, Gilder Sheppard's trying to get into the Zoom room, so we're still waiting for that. Trying to figure that out. Yeah. So, technology, right? We all love it, we all hate it. So, but this is one of those moments where it's just like, and again, for folks in the Clubhouse, this is our first like full-on hybrid event where we're both showing it online, showing it in the Clubhouse. So this is something different from us, and we're figuring it out as we go. So thanks for your patience. And then we had one other event for the Seattle Latino Film Festival, which was here, where we did have a director who was on the screen, so we were able to have somebody from far away participating. So that was kind of awesome. So Kimonti, it looks like you're back. It looks like we're still figuring out about Gilda and whether she's going to be able to.
She was saying that I think one of the links that she had, it says that the meeting was scheduled for tomorrow, so it wouldn't click her in. So I sent her the link that I had, and so hopefully that resolves.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Oh, yay.
Okay.
Hi. Thank you. We've got people on the clubhouse here who are cheering and clapping. So we're so grateful. I just want to say again to both Kimonti and to Gilda, thank you so much for participating in this event. I know that you have joined several other Meaningful Movies events, and you are so incredibly generous with your time, and just the work that you've done is so inspiring. So I just want to say thank you. I read Kimonti's short bio, and I don't know whether the folks online heard that, but I want to read Gilda's bio. So for those of you who don't know, Dr. Gilder Sheppard is an award-winning filmmaker whose documentaries have been screened internationally. She is an author, a professor at Evergreen State College, and one of the founders of Freedom Education for Puget Sound, which I hope we will learn more about tonight. So again, just welcome. I'm so grateful to both of you for being here. So I had started to ask a question of Kimonti, so I'm just going to go ahead and continue with that question for the moment. So Kimonti, your life has changed radically since the film was made. Can you talk about your release from prison and what you are doing now?
Okay, well, good question. First and foremost, man, thank you for having me in this space. For all the people who have seen the video, continue to support the work that, Dr. Sheppard, continues to do, as well as myself and the Brothers of the Black Prisoners Caucus.
And sisters.
And sisters, for sure, right? We got some awesome people in the space, and I was resentenced July 8th. 2022, and at my resentencing, the community definitely showed up, man, to really show them their love and support for not only the work that I've been able to do, but also the impact that it's been able to have outside the prison walls. And so that day on July 8th, Judge Limbaugh changed my life sentence to 340 months. 340 months is just a little bit over 28 years. And so after they did the recalculations, what it ended up doing was, I would only have to serve just a little bit under 25 years on that sentence. And so after the calculations were done, I realized that I did 25 years and 3 months. It let the system know that it was time for me to be immediately released. And so, the Department of Corrections, transported me from Shelton, Correctional Center all the way to West Seattle to my release address. And I've been free and working in the community ever since.
Thank you so much. So tell me, are you, in terms of the TEACH program, are you still involved, and in what ways are you helping to lead that?
Well, for a lot of the guys who are now out in the community, and the relationship that we're trying to also build with fellows who are still incarcerated through the Black Prisoners Caucus, as well as the BPC TEACH program, we're trying to work with the Department of Corrections to gain access to prisons, because we want to be able to make sure that we can continue to provide, the support, as well as resources that the men and the women on the inside will need in order to continue the wonderful work that is happening inside those liberation education classrooms. And so we're working, in community to build support and to build up resources in order to share with the brothers and the sisters on the inside. But, until we're able to actually enter into the gates and actually sit amongst the circle, it's still a process that's in waiting.
Thank you so much. Gilda, Dr. Sheppard.
Can I just add to what Kimonti said about Kimonti? He's a little modest about that. Not that he's that way, but he has his collaborative leadership. He thinks about, that collaborative leadership. He's also writing a curriculum that's connected to the film, and the film is going to be is in 30,000 free tablets in men and women's prisons, jails, and juvenile detention centers. And he and some of his colleagues have gotten messages from those prison individuals and who are incarcerated to them talking about this leadership. So he's also doing that, and there's so many other things. But this liberation education, really integrating into looking at art as social justice, but looking at it as an organizing tool. Because the Black Prisoners Caucus is a narrative that I dare say is in many prisons. I just had the opportunity and the privilege to meet the men and women and them and they who are incarcerated, and decided to, in my advocacy work as a sociologist and a filmmaker, to open the curtain on something that's already there. And so, in addition to other things, Kimonti and the men and women and the Black Prisoners Caucus and community show up at hearings for individuals, for resentencing, and they show up in mass. But they're also sponsoring legislative bills and those kinds of things. So I can go on and on what this young man is doing, but it's not only him. There's several Kimonti Carters who are, and they're not just men, they're women, because there's a Black Prisoners Caucus in the women's prison. And when I added that wasn't like, don't you forget about the women. I was just saying, just adding, because collaboration is important. And he reminds us of that about women. And so it's not just, I learned that from Kimonti, to make sure that representation is there. Yeah, I just wanted to ask. So what were you going to ask me?
That's beautiful. I love that. So I was going to actually ask. I want you to speak a little bit about, since you were talking about art. I want to ask. Can you speak to the restorative and transformative justice impact, both from the film, but also in terms of art in general? And also, if you can speak a little bit about your hopes when you decided to make the film and what that looked like.
Yeah. Well, the kind of artist that I am is to look at the possibility of art. I think it was Bertolt Brecht who says that art doesn't just show, put a mirror up to society. It gives the audience and the subject a hammer upon which to shape things. And, or James Baldwin says, show things that sometimes people don't see. Right. And to understand that what's going on in the prisons in Washington State. Well, let's be clear now. We have not been able to show this film in the prisons in Washington State. However, it's been national and international. In Canada, we did a workshop, I and a colleague of mine went to Ghana, West Africa, and we did a workshop and it was seen. And I met with some prison activists in Ghana. And at the end of this month, I was invited to South Africa to show the film. So, so this is an example of what art can do. And I wanted it to remind people of restorative and transformative justice, and also particularly what we do to children, and to understand that justice does not happen only after someone commits a crime. Justice, as the Black Prisoners Caucus and the Black Prisoners Caucus Teach program have constantly told us and reminded us in their stories that we start the definition and practice of justice is before a crime, right? Justice, as Marco said in the film, when the guys were saying, it's, it's this, it's this, it's this, and he said, this classroom is justice. And so we need to look at, because this is not a prison film. Prison is a character. And Kimonti Carter is not the movie star. He's the spine. And there are so many different tributaries, of the other men and women and activists that are there. And so restorative justice, I think, as Devin Adams, who is a member of the Black Prisoners Caucus and who is employed at Collective Justice, I always say that name wrong, Collective Justice, says that restorative justice and transformative justice is not a map, it's a compass. I just want you to think about that as a visual metaphor. You know, where does the compass lead us? It's not a map, and who's following that compass or those kinds of things. So it particularly starts in community, right? Doesn't start at the, in the lawyer's office or in the chambers or in those hollow halls, but it starts in community, and it's the healing process that Kimonti and the brothers and sisters that I happen to have the privilege and opportunity to work for keep telling me that yes, we need to pass bills, because the reason why I did this film is, I was appalled that there's no parole in Washington State. And then to realize that the reason why they don't have parole, so the folks say, is because of the racism, and people who went up for parole, particularly people of color, weren't getting it. And so it's like, clemency is doing the same thing. Kimonti Carter was denied a clemency hearing. Tanya Wilson, who started the Women's Village and the women's prison, Ph.D., and that was the most violent prison in Washington State at the time, in the early 2000s, when she started the Women's Village, she and her colleagues, crime went down by 50%. Now, and you don't give her clemency hearing? I wanted to expose, and where do we start the story with Tanya? Where did we start it with Kimonti? He joined the gang at 11 years old. And so you look at Kimonti's life, you think 11 years old, what was going on in this child's mind, And a lot of times people want to start with the family, but then, what was going on with the family, what resources. We realized that there's, that Kimonti was always into education, but not into schools because of what schools were doing and victimizing and labeling super predators and those kinds of things. And what support do we have for the family? And so there needs to be these healing circles that, restorative justice, and it needs to be legislatively enacted, and that's where transformative justice. So I made the film to want to bring back parole and learn so much about that. And I also wanted to change the juvenile sentencing laws that targeted, certain states. And I wanted to change the punitive suspension and expulsion practices that happen in public schools. And what I learned from, working with Kimonti Carter, Tanya Wilson, everybody else, is that I also wanted to look at culturally relevant K-12 curriculum and the importance of prisoner-initiated programs. And so, and due to COVID, we weren't able to go to the over 20 film festivals, but that was very interesting because that meant that the brother and sister on the corner were able to see it. So I'm an organizer, anti-racist organizer, and an intersectional Black feminist, and that scares some people. But then you see how kind I am, and so what happened is we organized around it. We had people to come to one house and do it, and watch it. They didn't have to go to the film festivals with it, Now I missed that experience, but it was important. So, we developed a multi-faith group as a result of the film. One rabbi started working with a Christian minister, and it's with Baha'i and members of the Islamic faith. And so it's spread, and it's gone on by itself, and the Black Prisoners Caucus in the community continues to flourish, but it had been flourishing. It didn't just start, Kimonti will say this, when Kimonti got out, right? Sometimes when you name something, that's when people punctuate, or you walk in the room, that's when they punctuate, things started. And the Black Prisoners Caucus, the men and women, remind me, it's not when you walked in the room, it was going on, just like Black Prisoners Caucus and community. As you can tell, I have the gift of gab, so I'll be quiet.
I love it, it's awesome. Kimonti, community, Gilder's talked a bit about that, and I want if you could talk a little bit for yourself about the ways in which community maybe didn't support you in the way that you needed, and the ways that you were able to build community in a way that may have surprised you, and how you see the work that you did kind of continuing and spreading, like the seeds that you were able to put in the ground, how they're able to flourish. So if you can talk a little bit about community, that would be great.
And so, again, another good question, right? And I think that, like I've always, felt support from the community, right? I think as a kid, as a child, growing up in the juvenile justice system, like I didn't know how to tap into that support. You know what I mean? And so, trying to find a way of like navigating life, right? It's easier to it's easier to kind of go with your social group as a youngster, because those are the most consistent people in my life, right? And so when we get to talking about the messaging, right, the messages that I was getting from my peer group was a lot consistent and a lot more specific than it was from the adults in other communities that was whether it was in the juvenile justice system or the educational system, right? The Boys and Girls Club, right? There's a certain level of care and concern I think is important in order for you to be able to make a connection. And so once I got to prison, right, I think that I was able to see that the shortcut is actually the long way. Right. And, what I was able to see was like being able to connect to community, right? Being able to be responsible and take responsibility for my actions, allowing myself to be able to, use conflict resolution skills and to a lot of these things. Like these was tools that I was able to put in my backpack that I was able to kind of pick up as I sat around and, and really, was nurtured and groomed within the circle of the Black Prisoners Caucus. And so as I learned about the impact of institutionalized racism, as I learned, a lot of the principles and the practice that the village was coming in to teach us, that the People's Institute was coming to teach us, that educators, wonderful educators, right, like Dr. Sheppard and Dr. Maxine Mims and many other Janet Prestons and Dr. Marsha Tatarungas and Gillian Harkin and there's countless folks who was coming into the prison, on their own dime, with their own time, because they cared, right, about people, right? They cared about people who were trying to pursue education and they wanted to be able to be of service, to assist however they could. And the more that we was able to kind of create ideas and to launch programs that we wanted to be able to see come to life, right? We was able to find a supportive community. And that all it did was really help to instill self-confidence and self-worth in a group of individuals who really didn't have a lot of it to begin with. And so as our confidence grew, so did our impact. And so the Black Prisoners Caucus, man, we was able to see not only was, liberation education something that could be transformative for the lives of Black men and women who was inside, but we quickly, realized that, everybody who was in prison was seeking ways and opportunities to be able to improve self. Right. And so once the BPC Teach program came around and guys realized that this was something that was truly about liberating the space in which people can grow and to transform their circumstances, BPC Teach grew. And so, currently it sits at 3 different prisons, Column Bay, Stafford Creek, and Shelton. About 7 other prisons also want it. However, the pandemic really kind of slowed down our ability of being able to kind of connect and help people understand exactly what liberation education is and also what it looks like in practice. And so I can't stress enough the importance of community, right? Community being able to come in, community being able to connect with us, community being able to be patient, right? Learning how to love us. And that in and of itself also helped me to be able to really see, my position and my place in the community. And and again, right, I want to be able to stress this, is that there's lots of men and women who sit behind the walls of the Department of Corrections here in Washington who are ready to contribute, right? Who are ready to help society learn how to deal with, you know, gun violence in our community amongst young folks, right? You can bring as many experts as you want to from as far as Cambridge, Columbia, Harvard, it doesn't matter. We're talking about people in the belly of the prison system who lived that experience as kids. You know what I mean? They lived it. And so they know exactly what it takes to get a child there and also what it's going to take to be able to get them out of there. You know what I mean? And so what we're trying to do is be able to make sure that we amplify their voice. That's our job as the Black Prisoners Caucus community group, right? To make sure that the voices that is inside isn't muffled, isn't silenced, but is amplified, right? Because those people who are closest to the issues are the ones who have the solutions to the problems. And so we want to make sure that people outside don't forget that.
Thank you so much. So I know that there are questions that we have in the audience, both here in person and also online. So I'm going to ask a separate question, and then while people are thinking about that, while Kimonti and Dr. Sheppard are answering that question, maybe the folks in the audience here and again online can think about their questions and either raise their hand or type them in the chat. So while people are thinking about that, the 2023 legislative session in Washington State has recently started. So is there legislation that you want to bring to the attention of our audience members and things that people can work on and literally so they can walk out the door tonight and they can do something to try and support the people who want to, you know, as Kimonti said, who want to be a part and want to help make the world a more beautiful place. So either one of you, if you want to talk about legislation.
And, you know, with regards to legislation, I would, you know, first I would, you know, just encourage the people in the group to, you know, actually look at the legislation that is actually connected to the criminal justice system, right? And so there are, you know, a bill around emerging adults, right? That's also kind of the category that I fell in, you know, which ultimately use the brain science as a way of being able to help determine, you know, whether, you know, people who were convicted at a young age are redeemable. Another bill, and I can't recall the number right off top, but that's something that I also can definitely make sure that is provided to this group in order for us to be able to disseminate that information. There's also another bill about being able to create a commissary account for prisoners, right? That way the money is able to go into a separate account. That way it's not taxed. Because right now is if you have a loved one who is incarcerated and you send them $100, depending on their crime, depending on if they have any child support, if they owe any fines, or things of that nature, will also determine how much of the money that they actually take from your family, your friend, or your loved one. And so some people lose as much as 95% in deductions. Literally, like you'll send them $100 and the state takes $95 of it and gives them a $5 bill. And so that right there, that commissary bill will also be something that helps people to be able to just maintain the quality of their life while they're incarcerated. Another one is also about raising the wages that many of the men and women who work inside you know, ultimately earn versus in the jobs that they obtain. And so like, and I went to prison in 1998, right? And 1998 to 2023, the pay scale for class 3 wages inside is still 42 cents an hour. You know what I mean? It's 42 cents an hour. So that means that you'll max out at 55 bucks. So, and so people are literally existing on $55. And so the raising of the wages of everyone in prison, right, to be clear, not just correctional industries, right? If it just raises and increases correctional industry wages, then that's not a bill that we will support, right? Because the majority of Black men and women and other men and people of color, right, they're excluded from being able to work in correctional industries. And so if this is a bill that passes that ultimately just satisfies folks who work in industries, again, right, it disproportionately won't affect the people who are most impacted. And so that would be a reason why we would not support it if it did not affect everyone. And I think in changing the juvenile point system for people who, as far as their calculated points, And so what that means is for men or women who were sentenced as kids, 11 to 12 years old, they use those conviction points to ultimately multiply your sentence. And so what they're trying to do now is eliminate any of the points from any juvenile convictions towards adult convictions as a way of allowing folks to be able to, ultimately have their sentences not as long. And so, and that's just a few of, I would just say, some of the ones that's been in the legislature for quite a few years. And I know they're coming up again this year. So that would be something that I would have people look into. But I would just also encourage people, if you have a legislative day where your community is going up to Olympia to advocate, to speak to their representatives, please do so. Right, stand in solidarity with people who's going to Olympia to actually advocate against issues that is affecting their community in a negative way. Like, we need community to be able to stand with community. And so legislative is definitely in session. There's a lot of people who are ready and willing to activate, as many of their legislators as they can to support issues that are as important to their community. And I would encourage this community to do the same.
The multi-faith group has an advocacy day, and then two of the bills that Kimonti talked about is House Bill 1324 for the juvenile points, and it's and then House Bill 1325 to review long sentences, right? And if you want to email me and put in the subject line legislative action, because I'm sure I'll get a lot of, if you really want to do this, but put in the subject line legislative action. And if you want to email me, I can send your email to Rabbi J. Rosenbaum, who is doing some organizing work for these bills that Kimonti is talking about. One point they showed Since I've Been Down, and then after they showed Since I've Been Down, it was 500 people who saw it online. And then the next week, we always connected with some action, some action. The next week, 200 people showed up and were taught how to whatever with their legislators and senators, and they went straight to their offices online. And we had certain bills that we're talking about. We even invite, and so folks usually vote nationally, but not locally. We need to vote locally, Look at what's going on with Roe v. Wade locally, in all these different states and stuff. So we really need to educate ourselves on this, instead of thinking about who's the president, who's, all that. That's important. I'm not saying that, but it's also that. And so if you want to email me at Gilder Sheppard with 2 P's at gmail.com and put in the subject line legislative work, or you got to put that in the subject line, okay? So that and then you doing it with the intention that I will share your email with Rabbi J. Rosenbaum and go from that, that makes sense.
Thank you so much. It's important information, and hopefully people have your email now, so this is good. So I wanted there are some questions that are coming in on the chat box, so I just want to ask a couple of them. And then I also want to be respectful of your time, and was hoping that folks, if they wanted to, would have a chance to both talk within their Zoom room, but also here amongst themselves. And we also have Susan Partnow, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I also wanted to, she's also knowledgeable about legislation and might be able to support us in that. Okay, thank you. So a question for Kimonti. This work is so heavy. How do you recharge so that you can keep doing the work? And that is from Verna Reese. Yes, muted. So you are muted, Kimonti, sorry.
Sorry about that. No, I seen that message in the chat, right? And I was thinking too, like, man, you're right. Like this work is heavy. But I think that one of the, I wouldn't call it an advantage, right? Having lived experience, right? But I'm also directly connected by people whose lives is directly impact, right? Like one of the things that I've been able to do over the course of 25 years of spending that time inside, the Department of Corrections is I also met a lot of brothers in there, right? And many of them guys are still in, right? Many guys who helped me get to where I've been at, right? Guys that I've learned with, grew with, cried with, fought with, literally. And so now when we get to thinking about the quality and the state of the Department of Corrections, it's like, yeah, that right there keeps me motivated. Is because I got a lot of brothers and sisters who still reside there who also deserve to be out here in the free world. Another thing that keeps me motivated is also the more people who are getting out of prison who are also motivated to also bring and effectuate change. I find myself surrounded by a lot of strong and smart individuals, men and women who have lived experience, who is justice impacted, but who are also just that much more determined to change the system because they know from a lived experience, how crippling it can be when there's nobody there to support and love you through your process. And so that's how I stay. That's how I stay. Motivated is because I realize that the people who were coming into the prison to see us every week, to help, really pass some of these lessons and these values on to us, they didn't give up. Right. And there was plenty of times when they was coming up there and, they would go from rooms being 50, 50 members in there to 3 members. Right. And these were folks who still came because they cared about the quality of our life and the conditions in which we were living. And so that in and of itself lets me know that like giving up is not an option. So, the people in the community, they keep me, they keep me, warmed up and ready to go. So.
Thank you so much. So we have a question from somebody here in our audience in person. So, Dick.
My question about legislation. Some of us fought very hard against the original 3 strikes bill decades ago, but we lost. What's the status of that bill now? How much has it been changed, or how much is there still changing?
So were you able to hear that? It was about the 3 strikes bill. It sounds like you're nodding. So yes, you heard that. So what's the status now?
Well, well, first and foremost, man, thank you, for being an advocate against, the injustice that you was able to see coming, right? And unfortunately, you're right? It was offered as an initiative. The state of Washington passed it, and ultimately the lawmakers made it become law. And now, since it's been enacted, right, I think since 1993, 1994, there's been multiple amendments, which wasn't initiatives, but there was legislators who actually felt that, increasing penalties and adding crimes to the 3 strike list was what they was, there to do. And so I would definitely say that a lot of the work that's happening around 3 strikes is a mess. They was trying to remove, robbery 2 and burglary 2 from the strike list. Fortunate enough, they've been able to remove robbery 2. What they have not been willing to do is to remove any other low-level crimes from that list of strikeable offenses, which is unfortunate because some counties have started to come around as a way of using 6164 as a way of providing some relief. Also, clemency has also been, opening its access and its doors to people who have 3 strikes who are also seeking release. So people have been able to get free through clemency. Through clemency and resentences and other support that's coming from particular King County, prosecutors' offices, particular out of King County. But there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And again, right, I think that cases like Blake, cases like Munchkin and Bartholomew, cases like Lightroff, cases like Odell, like these are laws that weren't changed by the legislature, right? These were laws that was ultimately changed by, or case law that was ultimately defined by the Washington State Supreme Court that ultimately affected old law. And this was one of the cases that allowed myself to get out as well as many other people because they had an opportunity to go back and get resentenced. And then the judge, with all of the information, was able to, write the course for folks who have been able to show the work that they've been doing. And so, but 3 strikes isn't the only avenue in which people are seeking relief, right? People are seeking relief through the expansion of the clemency board, which is, can be controversial depending on the people that you ask. But again, right, it's another avenue that provides relief for people who are locked up. And so again, like this is conversation that people are definitely having specifically right now because this is the legislative session. There's actually, I actually just got an email from my attorney actually earlier today asking me if I was available for Monday because I think that there's actually some bills that are actually have hearings on Monday, and I think one of them was one of the crimes that I was actually locked up for, and so this would definitely be another opportunity to become an advocate, right, and to educate legislators and lawmakers on the impact, right, both the pros and the cons. So I definitely would like to contribute however I can, and if this is something that people in this community is trying to participate in to learn more about, I would definitely make sure that this is something that we do in a collective manner because I think that there's a lot of work that can be done.
Thank you so
One
much.
of the things that when Kimonti started, named all the bills like the Blake bill and on and on and on. One of the things that kept rearing its ugly head, that even when bills are passed, they fall short in not dismantling the racial disparity, right? What happens oftentimes, when before Rob 2, am I correct, Kimonti, and folks think we're moving ahead, but what they had that was allegedly moving ahead still made it possible for particularly people of color not to have this freedom. And that's the reason why they're adding Rob 2 and something else. Because as soon as you think you got it, it moves. You see that there's racial disparity. You're like, okay, we won. Then look at it again. Look at it again and see who can take advantage of this and who is left in the lurch. And that's what we see keep coming and coming. And people are, talk about critical race theory, that, the role of race in the history of justice and law is not there. All you got to do is a cursory look. You don't have to do a lot of research, and you can still see that this is happening. And that's the reason why Kimonti says that there's more than 3 strikes. It's all these other things even. So, yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Dr. Sheppard, I want to, again, honor your time and Kimonti's time. I have another question from the chat.
I'm fine. And you can call me Gilder. Only in the classroom.
Right.
And when I need to use it in the Kimonti usually calls me Mama G or Auntie Gilder, but we're here. We're here. But this is community, so you can call me Gilder. Okay. It's okay.
Okay, so Gilda, there's a question from Nadine Peacock in the chat, and she asks, do you have ideas about strategies academic institutions can take to facilitate pathways to higher education for justice-impacted persons? Of course, you are a professor at Everett State College, so I just am curious about your perspective on how the wider, community of universities and colleges can take this on.
Invite the film and Kimonti and I, or just Kimonti and the Black Persons Caucus, so that we have a discussion guide for the film. But raise the question. As Tanya Wilson said, step into your brave space. Do not think that you have to have the answer. The answer is found in the practice and in the collaboration and talking to people. Kimonti Carter and his colleagues walking over to a white nationalist gang member? I wouldn't have done that. And don't look at things in silos. If you and as a sociologist, I teach at Evergreen in Tacoma, right? Right on Hilltop in Tacoma. Look around. And use your contradictions. Don't just preach. Use your contradictions. I was I was doing a film in a refugee camp, and this woman in a refugee camp in Ghana, West Africa, said, you know, Sis Gilder, the same AK-47s that you see in the Civil War in Liberia and our young child soldiers' hands are in yours. Now, what was that? I'm right there in Hilltop, right? You know, we didn't get graffiti. People respected us. We had some of the Crips as students and all that. But, you know, what was I doing? You know, oh, we have the Crips and the Bloods in the classroom. And what are you doing at the end of the day? So I dare say, step into your brave space, pose those questions, invite the film, invite the Black Prisoners Caucus, dare to do that, you know, and invite the community upon which you live, where your campus is. Look around and where your campus is and see what is there, right? Start that, and don't think you have to have the answer, but you must pose the question, you know. And you know, some of these DEI, don't wait for the diversity, equity, and inclusion people, because that's being hijacked too. I mean, it's like, whoa. You know, and you know, it's where diversity, equity, and inclusion go to die. Almost, I'm sorry. You know, you know, DIE or D, you know, is it DEI and DIE? But we have it there, so we have a mechanism upon which to question. And you know, look at where you are. Look at where you stand. And what proximity do you have to that, to the problem? And in faculty meetings, you have to pose the question. You have to. You must step into your brave space and do it, right? And invite Kimonti to your classroom. I mean, Kimonti can talk about public health, and don't ghettoize him and like, let's talk about prison. This man is brilliant. He's well-read, too. I mean, he can connect, you know, violence to public health to counseling, that to a political science overview of things, you know? And he will always bring a woman, a Black woman with him. And I'm not talking about me. Oh no, let's be clear. I'm behind the camera, right? He will bring Tanya Wilson or somebody, and they will rock your classroom, right? You know, so invite the community in, or take your classroom to a community event as a field trip. You know, don't think in silos. Dare to talk to your colleague and understand that you make mistakes just like they do. And use your contradictions, as Bell Hooks says, not Bell Hooks, Alice Walker says, you know, where are your contradictions like a show? Talk about your coming of age. You know, I still make mistakes. Imagine that. Yeah, and publicize them. That's liberatory education. It's not having the answers, it's posing the question. Bring the community inside and then go out on a field trip to the community. But don't go like, let's go look at the natives. No, I ain't talking about that. You know what I mean. Go to an event that people are talking about, right? Are doing something in. Those kinds of things. So, and take care of yourself. Because this is a wild world. They'll attack you, even your friends.
So thinking not in silos. So one of the images that you showed sort of repeatedly in the films, the images of the forest and then also the clear cuts. Can you talk a little bit about why that was something that you wanted to have as part of the film, but also I think part of the symbolism that you were portraying some?
Visual metaphors are something that I love to use, even the dance, the crumping, and the mask. That's not just any African mask. I did research on that. And that's a mask for protection. You see the multiple eyes and all that, right? And some people don't get it, and some people will. And that's how it is. So the clear cut and all that is the possibility of growth. This film is about the triumph of the human spirit. In spite of the horrible things that happen. This film is a love letter to children. I love children more than you could ever imagine. They make my heart sing out quiet when they walk in the room. I want to genuflect because we owe them so much, right? And that's the reason why I kept the kids in the film. And this clear cutting is what we do. It's what we do. But there's all these different things growing up. If you look clearly, you can see little sprouts coming up in spite of what we trample on, you know? And so even though I studied film and the cerebral cortex and all of that, the vagus nerve, because I want to look at physiological movement in your body. What's that book, The Body Keeps the Score? I wanted you to feel some movement in your body of that, even if you didn't know. Yeah. And you said it so well, Anne, the clear cutting and the possibility of trees. And, sitting, Kimonti's good friend, Shannon, in the forest where the Bloods used to play, have fun with one another, right? I mean, doing some crazy stuff too, but also having fun with them. I wanted to be there. And for him to say it's just like slavery. When slaves ran away, they went to the woods. And that is not condoning anything that these young people did. But it says, who's the responsibility in all this beauty? What are we doing, And all this beauty. A child, 11 years old, this young man. 11 years old, this brilliant young man joined the gang. 11. The first thing he does is see a female police officer draw down on him and said, if you move, I will shoot you. 11-year-old kid, clearly unarmed. But even if he was armed, what? What are we doing? Where do we start the analysis and those kinds of things? A friend of mine was teaches, he passed away, teaches at a community college. He would take the students, he's a writing teacher, Carl Wallaconis. He would take the students who were not doing well in reading and writing, they were like pre-101, 102, and he'd take them to different schools in the community where the school was to teach those children reading and writing. What? To me, that's doing something in the classroom too. Kimonti says that, and teach, we go as fast as our slowest learner. And when he says slow, he's talking about a nice little dance. He ain't talking about ignorance, right? And so, and for the question before, think about who you considered slow in your class. And have them have to be the teacher. That's liberatory education. It's not only going out and being the organizer. It's looking at your class, as Marco said, this is justice. Look at your classroom as justice and what you can do by shutting up. You know what I mean? I have my students write an essay on critical discourse analysis or post-structuralism, because I'm a sociologist. Then I have to ask them to create an artist to translate their research paper into an art installation. First they look at you like deer in headlight, and then what they create, my dear community, is beyond what you could ever imagine. Yeah, people create. Look at your curriculum and do something different. Challenge yourself. Well, I couldn't do that. Oh, really? Try it.
So this has been an amazing evening, and just again, I want to just say how grateful I am. We have about 20 minutes before the clock strikes here at the clubhouse, and we have to definitely be out. So at this time, if anybody wants to stay here and just get in a little small circle, I'm going to turn off the audio in the clubhouse. For folks that are online, y'all can stay as long as you want. I'm going to have my friend Beth, if you can come on down here maybe, and she's going to be talking to the folks again on Zoom. And Charlie, if you can unpin so that the Zoom room can kind of be together, because I know that there's folks that have questions. I also know that Susan Partnow is available to talk more specifically about the legislation. So if there's if you want to unpin, and then people can look at the whole group. So I'm going to turn off the audio here. I'm inviting Beth if she wants to participate for as long as.
I just want to say, Meaningful Movies gave us an award. Meaningful Movies has been around for how long? I mean, Meaningful Movies, since I've been down, is just one of them. Meaningful Movies, that you all are an example of justice. I mean, and what art can do. I mean, you should do it in people's living room. I remember Meaningful Movies. So I applaud Meaningful Movies. What you have been doing historically.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you. So I'm going to put things away. So we don't have to put things away, but I'm going to turn off the audio, and I'm going to have just my computer mic, and we're going to have people online talk a little bit while I say hello to the few folks who are here. So thank you.
Is Kimonti going to be able to stay?
Yeah, I don't know.
So you can unmute yourself and you can, I see a hand up. France, do you have a question?
Yeah, I've been waiting for a while to ask Kimonti. Kimonti, you talked wonderfully eloquently about what you've learned and the people who inspired you when you were in prison. I'm curious, partly because of that, talk about the brain development and everything, but I'm curious what held you or inspired you when you were younger, before you were prison involved?
What inspired me? I think as I think before I even turned 13, right? I think that was already kind of beginning to head in a particular path, right? And so I wouldn't say that my encouragement was necessarily positive, if you will, but I think that many of the role models that were in my life at that time, which were also young kids, right, which were young adults at that time, right, were sharing experiences that they had, with us littler kids, and we was picking these things up as a way of trying to help ourselves, ultimately survive the streets. And so I would say that the guys, of course, right, guys in our community, right, people in my family, or people who are my motivators. But I think that, again, my peer group, influence over my life is the thing that ultimately won out over at the end, because they was the most consistent in my life, right? And so, I think that if we're looking for answers about how do we break up that, that crash course that many young people who are kind of heading in the wrong direction will end up in, it's like we gotta provide them something different that provides consistency, right? And it has to be people who's leading with love, right? We're not going to be able to punish a child into behaving the way we want to. That's not what punishment does. Punishment makes people hide the behavior. It doesn't correct it. You know what I mean? And so, through punishment, man, we're not going to be able to convey the type of lessons that we want to. It only can be done with love. And so, that's how we're going to do it. We're going to love people through it.
I thought I heard earlier that you didn't like school, but you loved education. And that was what I was sort of wondering about, where that came from.
Well, because learning, I think, learning, whether it's learning, knowledge, information, game, right? Like there's a lot of different names and labels that people give information, right? And most of the time it depends on where you get it from. And so, sitting in a classroom, right? Like I think that we can perform some basic tasks. We can do our homework. We can sign our name. We could read the book and talk about the plot, right? But I think a lot of the things that happens in the classroom that discourages kids, right, is sometimes there's a cultural disconnect that makes children of color feel unwelcome. And so once we begin to lose that connection to the classroom, right? When educators, and the majority of my educators when I were young were white women. Right, many of them didn't know how to connect or relate to young Black kids. You know what I mean? So what they done is they was bringing a lot of their values to the classroom, right? And white middle class values are expecting their class to be quiet and to receive this information, right? It's not to encourage. It's not about engagement. It's not trying to figure out what your learning style is. A lot of the times you get educators who are stuck in their ways and they're not willing to adjust. right? And when there's a problem, which happens to be a child, kids are kicked out of their classroom in order to maintain whatever the standard that they was trying to keep. And so many of us, my friends included, were victims of that. And so getting kicked out of the classroom became something that we just eventually got to the place where we didn't care any longer, right? Because we realized that we wasn't wanted or cared for here anyway. So, but again, right, yeah, of course I love education and learning and discovering new things and being able to talk about things that we just read, right? I think that that's a natural process for any child, right? Like our imagination is still engaged, right? But you got to learn how to keep it engaged, right? You got to learn how to use the first step to build onto the second step in order to continue me down the process that ultimately leads me someplace where it can become productive. And so I think sometimes we kind of miss the point on that.
So we just have a few more minutes before we have to close down. Is there any other comment or question? I want to thank everybody who came tonight. Barb, all the way from Spokane. You know, we have venues for meaningful movies all over the region, so that's really great. Any last words?
I would just say for me and for movies, man, thank you. It's been an honor to definitely show up in space, you know, for you guys to show the movie and also be able to just want to be engaged, man. It's really my honor, so thank you for having us.
Well, thank you for all that you've done. Keep doing. It's for our children and our grandchildren. So, all right, with that, I guess.
I'd like to thank I like to just take the time out to say again, I am so touched, Kimonti, that you're home.
Come on.
I've heard you speak lots of times. I've seen you in person at several of the prisons, and you've actually helped my son along the way. And I just have to just commend you for the great work that you have done. It does not go unnoticed, maybe to some, but believe you me, your name rings out here.
Come on.
And I just got to touch bases with you because I want to just talk to you. You have been so heavy on my mind. And when Tara sent this out through work email, I was like, oh, I'm there. My Thursday is shut down. I'm there. And I love you. I'm so excited to see you home. And I know that you got so much good things going on, and I want to be a part of it. I do.
Come on.
I do. I'm going to reach out to you.
Man, please do.
I surely will. I'll tell my son I see you.
Okay. I appreciate
All right. Thank you.
I want to thank Tara, too. Tara's been working a long time in prison.
Awesome.
Let's give her a hand. I'm telling
Yes,
you.
Tara.
Tara walks the walk, talks the talk. She's right there.
Love you guys. We love you both. Gilda, Kimonti, we love you so much and so appreciate this night.
So Nadine has had her hand up. Did you want to say something, Nadine?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so inspired. And y'all will be hearing from me with an invitation to come out to Illinois and screen the film because it is just fabulous. So be on the lookout for email from me.
Come on. We with that.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
see Susan Partnow also has her hand up. Susan, did you have a question or a comment?
I wanted to express my appreciation, and I could sit at the knee of Gilda and Kimonti for hours and hours and hours and never get enough. So can old folks sign up for your classes, you know? I just really appreciate it. And I know did want to mention the Poor People's Campaign. We have sponsored a couple of showings of the film, and we are fighting hard and working on the legislation you mentioned, as well as other things, because we know we need to get at all of the underlying causes so we can undo the systemic racism and all the isms. So I hope you folks will think about joining us, and there's going to be a legislative day. We are joining up with the Faith Action Network. And thank you, Gilda and Kimonti, and amazing work you do.
So I also just want to give my thanks. I just have said it before, but want to say again. I don't know if you can see me. Nope, it looks like I am like my video. I'm sorry. But I just want to say you all are amazing. This was such an incredible event, and I'm so grateful to everybody who joined. And Kimonti and Gilda, I also could just listen to you for hours and hours. So where I am at the clubhouse is it's all shutting down. They're turning off lights and everything. So I am going to say goodnight. And just, I don't know whether, and our tech helper, Charlie, may also, I don't know whether you want to stay on or not, but he also can leave, but he can also assign somebody else the host if y'all want to keep talking. So you guys can talk about that amongst yourselves. For myself, thank you. And I will be attending another event for this because it's incredible. So thank you again, and good night.
All right. You guys have a great night.
Thanks.
Thank you all so much.
Night,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you all.
All
You guys
right.
have a wonderful night.
All right. We're all going to make this a better world.
Yes.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, bye.
Not one step back.
There you go. And if you do, you just lean in to move forward, right?
Keep
Just
on going. All
to
right.
move forward. Just a little
All right.
dance. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. All right. Bye.